Today, are the banks spooked? Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, one latest post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Today I'm joined by Robbie Barwick from the Citizens Party. Hi Robbie.
Hi Martin.
Yeah, pretty good news, huh? Things are happening.
Coming thick and fast. You and I have never spent so much time together.
No, but for good purpose, right? Because essentially, you could actually say the pendulum is tilting a little bit away from the banks and the power of the banks towards Australians, Australian communities and Australia Post.
And we've got a lot of momentum now, and that's why it's worth discussing all these breakthroughs as they happen. So yes, things are happening. Overnight, the banks, or yesterday, two of the big four banks, NAB and CBA, announced that they are renewing the Bank at Post deal with Australia Post, which Christine Holgate was the architect of, for which she was basically run out of town. But 8 months after the campaign we started to right a wrong here, they're renewing it for 10 years. And I fell off my chair. No, I didn't fall off my chair, I was standing up. But Kimberly Kitchen claims she fell off a chair when Christine Holgate said she bought Cartier watches, and she was bullshitting. So am I, but it's an expression. This is a big deal. These banks, this is a PR exercise by the banks, right? They want to be looking to do the right thing here because, frankly, we made it impossible for them not to. But they've gone above and beyond with a 10-year deal. Let me assure you. So this is something people should reflect on. People, especially people on this show and in our organisation, etc., our supporters who participate in this. These are the things you can achieve. We haven't achieved our goal of a postal bank fully reforming the financial system, but on the way to achieving that goal, you can have a lot of these mini breakthroughs. Because I can tell you now, there's lots of different factors here, but what this one immediately does is puts the minds of 3,000 LPO licensed post office businesses around Australia, puts their minds at ease straight away for the next 10 years. And that's a huge deal. That's what they were losing sleep over when Christine Holgate was forced out, right? Because only she had delivered this deal that had made such a difference in their lives. They knew the renewal was up in the air. It was a real question whether the banks would smell blood in the water, right, and take advantage of that to just screw Australia Post back down, and then they'd be back to square one. And we've talked about this on the show. And that I reckon that was probably a live possibility, but our campaign made a very big difference. And now the LPOs know that at least for the next 10 years, their future is set with this deal.
And very importantly, it provides access to commercial capabilities for small businesses and households in the regions particularly, right? But I'm fascinated by this change to the cash withdrawals. The banks basically allowed the post office now to hand out large amounts of cash.
Yes. So I think NAB is upped its withdrawal limit from $2,000 to $5,000. Now that's still, if you went to a bank branch, you'd expect to be able to get out more than that, but not much more. You now have to give them notice if you want more than $10,000. It's probably natural there was a bit of a restriction at post offices, but it speaks to a couple of things. The fact that they've increased it. They're accepting the post offices are going to be an important part of their infrastructure, and they're going to have to play ball there. Secondly, I suspect they're starting to accept that they may not win the war on cash, Martin.
Yes.
Because the RBA so far isn't weighing in on their side. The government backed down on their part of it, which was the $10,000 cash ban. We forced them to back down. The game has been played by the private banks ever since, right? And they tried to take advantage of the pandemic to push cashlessness like crazy. But all the statistics show there's never been more cash in the community. People have, in these uncertain times, have chosen to grab it and hoard it. And then there is a backlash campaign, especially in regional areas, of people saying, sorry, no, we need cash. because we can't rely on the technology all the time, and cash is 100% reliable. And so, yeah, the banks appear to have acknowledged that in some way, and they've upped the cash withdrawal limit from the post offices in this deal, which is quite good.
Absolutely. Well, it's very interesting. I mean, I made a post over the weekend talking specifically about developments in the UK, where the pilots with effectively the post office in the UK being this hub for all of the banks in a particular location and providing those local community services and access to cash and things are going really well. And in fact, now some of the regulators in the UK are saying, this is a really important development, and there's a building call to make cash effectively a universal service obligation. In other words, no way is cash going to disappear. It's going to be a fundamentally important part of the the community and the service delivery. And interestingly, some research was done there showing that a number of older people were very grateful for this because they didn't necessarily handle the technology. But younger people too were also very, very grateful that they could access cash, particularly when sometimes the online services don't work. So this is a really, this is a critical backstop, and I think we should be calling for the same here, a universal service obligation relating to access to cash.
Absolutely. Sometimes the technology fails, and there is no substitute for cash. Plus, we tend to pigeonhole the use of cash into certain demographics, such as elderly people, such as rural people. When you look at the figures, it's actually a significantly larger proportion of the population than that, and for very good reasons. And yeah, as young people get more sophisticated with money, they'll tend to learn from experience and go, so there's this option here that means I don't have to worry if I'm close to something that can allow me to use a card or a phone or whatever. I can still have this. So what we know is the RBA has consistently said, while there's demand for cash in the economy, they will not move to a digital currency because they're not going to maintain two, and there's still demand for cash in the economy. So this is what we know about this renewed Bank at Post deal, right? Which appears to us to be a good sign. So that's why we're talking about it. I'm hoping to get more information about the nuts and the bolts of the deal, because there's various, that maybe not everything is as good as the previous deal. I don't know yet, right? We'll see. But what I do know is that what we've already said, plus from the licensed post office's standpoint, because this is the deal that made them viable, even if, for instance, maybe the banks didn't pay as much per year this time as they did to Christine Holgate, which was 20 million per year at the time. Maybe it's a bit less than that. The licensed post office's share doesn't change, right? So their payment is guaranteed, and they're going to make sure they get that in writing. Their payment is guaranteed, but there may be some other things to consider about it. Now, Martin, I want to raise something though that people might already be thinking about, because the last time you and I talked a week ago, we were talking about the postal bank and how that's the solution for a lot of this stuff, a dedicated public postal bank. And the question is coming up, well, if the banks have done this deal for 10 years, do we need one? And before I answer that, people might be wondering about Westpac and ANZ. Westpac has agreed to another year, but they've flagged that they're interested in a long-term deal. And I know the way the banks think in this area, they're actually pretty concerned about being left out. They are a cartel. Let's not pretend otherwise, right? They want to all be seen to be on the same page. And apparently ANZ is also saying, they refused last time, they're saying they're actually interested in talking about whether they participate in the deal or not. Because they refused last time, ANZ customers have not been able to use post offices to do their banking for the last 3 years, right? And I suspect ANZ's had a lot of bad feedback about that, and now that may be changing. So that's good. It's good the big four banks are doing this. So the question is, do we need a postal bank? Well, there's many reasons for a postal bank. One of which is, something that guarantees the post offices and their viability, etc., right? Which is set up for the next 10 years with this. That's not the only reason. this does not change the nature of the big four banks. They're still the same profit-hungry, rapacious, blood-sucking parasites they always were. Sorry, we've spooked them into doing something for PR purposes, right? But fundamentally, that's what they are.
Yep.
So it's like we've set up. They've agreed to put in the pipes for a water supply for the next 10 years. I'm just as interested. That's great, but I'm just as interested. What's the quality of the water coming through those pipes, right? And frankly, it's pretty bad, right? We need a better banking system. And so the other benefit of a postal bank is a public bank, and it has to be public because the big four are so dominant, but there's benefits for public anyway, that forces them to compete. They don't have to compete now, right? Right now they're competing for PR maybe on this deal, but that's it. They fundamentally don't compete. As Dr. Wilson Tsai, the former APRA principal researcher who spent a lot of time in Canberra with me on things like Glass-Steagall, pointed out the only thing they compete on is who can get the biggest profits from stealing from people, right? A public bank forces them to compete, and it's got one of the reasons that it has to be public is there's a lot of smaller private banks that have started up to try and fill niches in the financial system in the last few. I apologise for that.
No props.
There's a lot of smaller banks that have started up in the last few years to try and fill niches in the financial system. They've had a very hard time getting a foothold. It's very, very difficult to compete against these big four banks. Very difficult. And more, I think one or two of them, one of the big four banks just bought them out anyway, right? That's what happens. A public bank has the whole wealth and power of Australia and the government behind it, right? And that's a different kettle of fish for the big four banks because you need that. And I'll give you one very practical example related to Bank at Post, why you need it. If you do a transaction at Bank at Post, now it's good the service is there, but the fees are horrible, right? $3 for any transaction involving your card, your bank will charge you just for you could go and pay a bill there and use your card, and your bank would charge you $3. And I understand the actual banking fees, especially in regional areas, are $4 per transaction. $4. Now, when Christine Holgate Martin signed this deal back in 2018, the fees for these transactions were nowhere near that. Nowhere near that. They have gone up, but the payment that the LPOs have got has not gone up. So the whole increase in fees has gone to the banks, right? They know that people, they know the factors you and I've talked about a lot. There's a whole bunch of these licensed post offices at a bank that do banking services that are more than 50 kilometres from the closest bank. There's a map of them. We can put them up again. Well, if you're one of those, you have to accept any fee they charge you because you need to do the banking service, right? That reflects some of the problems with the real lack of competition in our big four banking oligopoly system that we have. A postal bank can actually change that. And so, yeah, this deal can last the next 10 years, but what a post and then who knows what the banks might do. But a postal bank introduces that kind of competition and sets up Australia Post and guarantees its viability for all time. That's why we still need a postal bank, and our campaign for that continues unabated. It's because we're on a campaign for that we get these kinds of results in the meantime, though. And that's what people should never forget. So when you see that the campaign forced them to do the right thing, don't back off, go harder. Let's get more concessions out of them, right? Let's get them all buying Christmas presents for everyone this year. Do whatever. I don't care. They're on the run, they're spooked. Let's keep spooking them.
Yeah, and two observations. The first is, of course, that lending for small business, particularly in regional areas, is very, very difficult at the moment. I mean, I get it all through my surveys, particularly now with all the lockdowns and things. The fact is that having access to small business finance through the local post office would make perfect sense, and it would actually be a very, very valuable service to help the commercial development of regional areas in particular. So that's one of the things that I'm particularly interested in. The other is that, everyone was saying, digital's the future. Everybody's going to be using their smartphones and things. It's really informative to know how much of regional Australia still does not have access to digital services. Right? You can't assume that the internet's everywhere. You can't assume your smartphone is going to work. And even areas not far away from main centres have huge issues with digital access. So again, local boots on the ground, local capability on the ground makes perfect sense. And that's why this is such an important story.
That lending thing is very important because the bank we proposed, it's called the Commonwealth Postal Savings Bank, and that's the resolution we put up there that you put on your screen last week when we talked about this. This is a proposal for a bank that is a dedicated public bank. It's not the post office. It's not Australia Post getting a license. It's a dedicated public bank, but it's set up in such a way that it only works, that it will work through the post offices, right? But the banking will be done by bankers, properly trained bankers. And this is how the Commonwealth Bank started in 1912, by the way. So, and there's on our magazine, the Australian Alert Service, there's an interesting historical article about this on the back page this week about the Commonwealth Bank starting. And the postmaster, there's a funny story when they built the East-West Railway line to Western Australia. The Commonwealth Bank provided banking services to all those workers along the line. And the postmaster would go out with the banker, right? And they would go there together, and it'd take ages to get there. But when they arrived at the camp, the postmaster would do the postal stuff, and the banker would do the banking stuff. They worked together in the same building essentially, and they were a team, right? But they took care of those services at once. So this is what we envisage should be the model for Australia Post going forward. The post offices are the premises and the branches, and the post office staff can do most of the transacting, right? Because that's easy to do. But then you can make your loan application at the post office, and the proper bankers will assess that loan, right? But that lending is going to be a very important part of the picture because regional communities need credit. And I was asked today, just before we came on, Robbie, will the postal bank lend for mortgages? And I said, well, first of all, it'll lend for what's needed, but I don't think, given every bank in Australia is obsessed about lending for mortgages, it's not that necessary. This is what, if it's necessary, it can do that, but this is going to specialise in the kind of business lending that the banks don't want to do. Or every Tom, Dick and Harry bank in Australia wants to do mortgages. Even these union super fund banks like Me Bank, that's their specialty, mortgages. Everyone wants to do mortgages, right? We need banks that can do something else. But then I was told that this question came from Cooktown, a councillor in Cooktown in Queensland, where they got smashed by the cyclone. But see, banks want to do mortgages, but only in the area that suits them, right? And they don't want to lend for mortgages, something as simple as mortgages in Cooktown. Well, of course, this is the kind of bank, if that's the need, that can provide that, right? Because it's backed up by the full faith and credit of the whole nation, and it can provide the credit need that's necessary.
And the whole point about this is the model we're talking about is banking as it should be, which is effectively enabling and facilitating other things to happen, right? Not just to drive massive profits for shareholders, but to enable businesses to actually go about their business, or to enable homeowners to buy a home in those regional areas where perhaps they can't today. I mean, that's the core, move back to what we're calling it. This is real meat and potato banking. This is what banking should be, not the highly speculative, frankly, derivatives-driven, mortgage-driven monstrosities we got today that just frankly milk everybody for their shareholders. Right? This is a very different model of banking.
Yep, exactly. Now, that said, the reason we've been talking about that is because that is why, despite this 10-year deal, we still need a postal bank. But I do not want to downplay the significance of the 10-year deal, right? One, it is good for it addresses an immediate problem for the viability, the medium-term viability of the licensed post offices, and that's dear to my heart now that I've got to know them. The rural communities know they'll have their banking services for now, right? While we're still fighting for that. So there may be aspects of the deal for Australia Post that will come out, and we can question that, but that's still a good deal. But the main thing I want to emphasise about it, Martin, so that people, especially on this channel, appreciate, is how it came about.
Yep.
Right? And that is because we have this campaign. And let me just capture that a little bit, because I want to talk about Four Corners as well on Monday night, and I hope plenty of people saw it. But when Christine Holgate was ambushed in October last year, 22nd of October, at that time, that's when she was due to begin negotiating with the banks again on renewing the deal. They'd done a 3-year deal, right? They're going to, are they going to renew it? She was ambushed, and there would have been blood in the water. In fact, one of the first things the banks did was jack up their fees for Bank at Post services, right? And this was completely up in the air. Where's this going? What our campaign did was shine an enormous floodlight on, first, the importance of the 2018 Bank at Post deal. So suddenly the whole country started hearing about this, because we had to tell them, because that was the context for the damn Cartier watches. They weren't given because she's Marie Antoinette chucking around gold watches. She's the opposite of that. She had worked with 4 executives who worked their tails off to make these banks pay up, right? And they pulled it off and saved Australia Post. Remember, we covered this in your show. Australia Post had given them a deadline of the 30th September 2018, else they would have pulled the plug on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of regional communities banking services. And she saved them with that deal, right? And we told that story. And so the Bank at Post deal, the name Bank at Post, became associated with a greater good. Suddenly, the whole country's hearing about Bank at Post and how significant it was. A few months before, during the hearings, suddenly Josh Frydenberg comes out and wants to be identified as part of the deal because he played a role at the time, said nothing during the ambush. We made people realise what a big deal it was. Yeah, I was part of that deal. I helped the banks. I helped get the banks to the table. Yeah, everyone, what is it? Success has many fathers, but father's an orphan, right? Suddenly everyone wanted to be part of this. So under those circumstances, how can the banks pull out? Right? From a PR standpoint, we made it impossible for them to pull out. And the second part of the equation was the postal bank campaign. And this is why we're using the term spooked for this show, because Bob Catter made the observation when he gave testimony to the hearings on the Senate inquiry into Australia Post, that the banks probably agreed to the deal in 2018 with Christine in the first place because they were afraid, since she'd been talking about Australia Post becoming a bank, they were afraid if we don't do this, we might have a postal bank to deal with, right? That hadn't been talked about for a couple of years. We started talking about it again very, very loudly in the context of this campaign, right? Postal bank, postal bank, postal bank. Now, and I know the banks monitor everything when it comes to the various things that affect them, right? They've got their ear to the ground everywhere. Ask Wacker Williams, the senator who was instrumental in getting the Royal Commission up in 2018. He became such a threat to the banks in his day. CBA hired a private investigator to spy on him, following around the country and spy on him, right? The banks are very, very conscious of these things. So we're talking about postal banks everywhere, and they've now come up with a 10-year deal, right? And that is a testament to this campaign. And I want people, if you participated, if you made calls, if you sent emails, etc., you have helped to do this. But like I said, let's not back off. Let's go forward. And the good news is a little bit of an irony, because that campaign around Christine Holgate and the licensed post officers embarrassed the government and really made the issue blow up in their face. Senator Sarah Henderson attacked us in the hearings and attacked me personally, but by attacking me, she's attacking all of us. I'll do a reverse Spartacus, right? If I'm Spartacus, you're all Spartacus. So I was just the one who was there. She attacked me, and she attacked the Citizens Party, and she attacked everybody. But why don't you understand the motivation? She was attacking us all because we were the people that blew this up in her face. But because of that, when Four Corners did their story on Monday night on Australia Post, they felt they had to actually cover that part of the story. And thank God they did, because it was the only part of the story that actually acknowledged the role of the campaign in making no Four Corners story. None of this would have happened, right? The campaign that ordinary people participate in made it happen. Without it, none of it would have happened. Four Corners did a fairly superficial job, in my view. There was one really good part on privatisation, but the rest was pretty superficial. But they felt they had to cover the Citizens Party's role and my role, and that part essentially is a form of an acknowledgement of the grassroots campaign that made this happen.
It's certainly quite amusing, isn't it? And look, the fact of the matter is, people should give themselves a pat on the back, because, you know, if you engaged around this, if you made those calls, it all helped to shift the dial, to move the momentum in the right direction. But we can't stop now, right? That's really the point. And we can't just say, well, 10 years, that means that, you know, nothing else needs to happen, right? This is the first step. We have to make sure that the next step and the next step is also taken as well. So we'll continue to push and pressurise, but we thought it was important to bring this to the audience and to celebrate, you know, a small win, but there's more to be done.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, pat yourself on the back, but when you got them spooked and you got them on the run, let's keep them on the run, right? We need to clean up this banking system. We're getting bombed. People are approaching us all around the country with all kinds of different aspects of it. The Royal Commission really may as well not have happened. They got rid of, you know, the one guy who may have indicated that he wanted to, you know, lift the game of the regulators, James Shipton. He's been run out of town. But they, you know, as we discussed last time, they have to, you know, the Senate's proved to be an obstacle. Barnaby Joyce is back, and the National Party under him, they are the people that are in favour of things like a postal bank, want a better banking system. They're stomping their feet a bit, and that's good. So they're kind of getting boxed in, but a lot of that's being shaped around the focus work we do, right, in the community here, where we're making it clear to the powers that be, we demand this. That's what this focus work does. So we have to keep that up, right? You don't back off now and rest on your laurels. We keep it up.
Absolutely, yes. No rest for the wicked. But Robbie, thanks very much for your time today. Very important, very good news, and we'll keep pressing.
Thanks, Martin. Keep it up.
See you again.